Yeah, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out to FUSIONCon's final event for this FUSIONCon of this school year, which is the faculty panel. And then afterwards, we're going to have a little bit of a closing ceremony to mark the end of FUSIONCon. So if faculty, if you want to stay for that, you're welcome to, but otherwise, you're free to go after the panel. Yeah, so I will explain a little bit about how this event will go down. We have invited 4 different professors from varying departments at UCI to talk a little bit about their roles as professors and lecturers at UCI, any projects or research they're facilitating, and just generally their industry and educational background. So they have been gracious enough to give you guys some of their time to answer any questions you guys have regarding research projects or anything related to UCI, to sort of introduce you guys to the resources and opportunities available to you as undergrad students from your professor's point of view. So without further ado, let's get started by introducing the faculty panel. On you guys, each of your slides, if you could introduce yourself, a little bit about your professional or academic background, and any like research or industry that you're in right now, or anything else you have going on. So I guess we'll start out with Professor QV, if you want to introduce yourself.
All right, cool. Hi, I'm QV Dang. I'm a teaching professor over in the ECS department, and got my PhD here a few years ago. And I got my bachelor's here many years ago. I got my master's at Long Beach. Some of the research projects that I'm supervising revolve basically around the second thing that you see on the slide, which is Zotponics. And that's a sustainable IoT hydroponic setup that we're planning on making available through the UCI Fresh Hub. So that's a purely student-driven project that started a few years ago, and we've just kept it going because more students have been interested in it. My personal research is more on the CS side, and I work on AI-driven recommendation systems. Think of it as when you go on Amazon, Facebook, you get all these targeted ads. I look at it from the education side based on how you interact with the class on Canvas, where it can recommend that you go from there. And some of the clubs I advise at UCI are the IEEE student chapter, as well as the Micro Mouse competition team, and a couple other groups as well. Research opportunities available. If there's any mechanical engineers here who just want to build something, Zotponics is looking for a mechanical engineer. It's primarily ECS students right now, and they're looking for somebody who can build the box better than they can.
Yeah, shout out to any mechanical engineers who need some project experience. All right, thank you, Professor QV. We'll move on to Professor Kopp.
Hello, I'm David Kopp. I'm also a teaching professor, but in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And I did my graduate school up in Santa Barbara a few years ago. And then since then, I was working at Sandia National Laboratories, doing research on the power grid, looking at stability and controls and optimization for planning for the future US electric grid. I'd love to talk to any of you interested in working at the national labs. It's a sort of unique niche opportunity for engineering. So since then, I joined UCI in 2019. So I had a little bit of time here before we all went remote. So I've seen a few of you in person, but not many. But here at UCI, it's probably hard to avoid me if you're in mechanical and aerospace engineering. So I teach things like circuits, dynamics, mechanical systems laboratory, basically a lot of dynamics and controls related courses, things like mechatronics. And I also teach the capstone design and senior design projects. So there are a couple that I specifically advise, and then I sort of generally help out with the entire program. A couple that I advise are the Intelligent Ground Vehicle, or IGV, and also UAV Forge, which is unmanned aerial vehicles. So in both of those projects, they are multi or interdisciplinary, where we have a lot of mechanical engineers working on those projects, but we also have double E's, computer science, working on things like avionics or the control systems or programming. So we do a lot of sensor integration, a lot of sort of building these systems from the ground up and looking at a holistic systems view of these things. Let's see, some of my other research, I'm interested in engineering education. So maybe some of you have taken surveys from me before, but looking at things like testing anxiety and specifically how some of this remote learning is affecting our students. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I'd be happy to talk to you more about any of these things. So definitely feel free to reach out. It's been my privilege to work with the Fusion engineering competition teams the last 2 years. So I hope you think about joining those as well, and hopefully I'll see you there too.
Thanks again for advising the robot pupper projects. All right, so thank you, Professor Kopp. Moving on from there, we have Jess Gillispie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Gillespie. I'm a lecturer in informatics. I got my bachelor's and master's degree at Central Florida, University of Central Florida. I've only been teaching for 1 quarter last fall, and I'll be teaching informatics on INF 43 again next fall. Besides that, I've spent 16 years in test systems engineering, software engineering. I currently work at Advantest Test Systems, and we make test equipment for semiconductors. So our big customers are Apple and Samsung, and we make all the test systems that test the processors that go in all the phones. I personally am responsible for managing a fleet of Apple test systems and writing software all the way from firmware up to the graphical interfaces, the hardware drivers, and things like that. With UCI, I'm just getting my feet wet with all the different things that I can do and help students and mentoring students, and just kind of working my way around. So I've been learning a lot from the students, and I hope they've been learning from me, and I'm very grateful to be part of this panel. So thank you guys, and thank you to the Fusion directors to invite me to this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you to you as well, Mr. Gillespie. Moving on from there, we have finally our last panelist, Professor Ardonia. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ardonia. I'm an assistant professor at Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering. So I'm very new here. I just started in October 2020, and I am very pleased and honored to be part of the faculty panel because as far as I know, I think I'm the only Filipino School of Engineering professor. So I'm very happy to learn about fusion. And also, because I'm new, it's also nice to be here in the Zoom room with the other faculty that I haven't met. So hi, QV, Jess, and David. It's nice to meet you all. So I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I finished my bachelor's degree in the University of Philippines, Diliman. And I was a chemist by training. And I did my PhD at Johns Hopkins, where I got my first taste of some engineering projects. My degree there is also in chemistry, but I was part of the Institute for Nanobiotechnology, wherein it gave the formal training for me to be co-advised between the physical sciences and the engineering. So I have a co-advisor in the engineering. And then after that, I did a postdoc training at the Wyss Institute at Harvard. And then, in October 2020, joined UCI. So since then, I've been leading the Laboratory of Biomimetic and Adaptive Materials. So my lab is mainly interested in developing biomaterials that have interesting function, optoelectronic function that makes them adaptive and responsive to specific triggers. And we want them to be biointerfaced with excitable cells like neurons and cardiomyocytes. So if you're interested with multidisciplinary projects at the interface of chemistry, biology, and engineering, I might be looking for a couple of undergrads this coming academic year, since I have a couple that will be graduating this year. And again, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be part of this faculty panel.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ardonia, for that introduction. And thanks again to all of the panelists for all of your introductions. So now we will get into the Q&A component of the panel. And we'll start out by asking the professors a couple starter questions to get the conversation started. So the first, and after the start a question with moving into an open Q&A where anyone from the audience can ask questions if they want to. So the first question I have for the panel, what kind of opportunities do students have to work with you at UCI, whether that be projects, research, or anything academic or professional related? I know you guys, some of you covered that already, but I'll start with Professor Kopp.
Sure. So there's a lot of ways you can get involved working with me. One, like I said, is stay plugged into Fusion, and hopefully we can do some more really exciting engineering projects next year. Other opportunities, I would say, in terms of coursework, we have the engineering projects program, which I touched on briefly. Even as a freshman, you can enroll in MAE 93, which is a projects course. So actually, I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat in a minute, but you can go to the School of Engineering website and search for MAE projects. And you can enroll in a class now. You can reach out to the student team leads and or the faculty advisor and just learn more about the projects. And you can enroll even as early as freshman year. And then later on, you would enroll in a course called the Senior Capstone course. So that's another way. Another option is to talk to me about research. So I'm always looking for students to do MAE 199 individual study courses with me. And it can touch on a number of different topics. I've had students working on open source software tools for simulating dynamical systems, things like control systems for an artificial pancreas, students looking at, again, engineering education related research. So there's really a broad breadth there. So feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you more about what your interests are and how they might align with what I'm doing.
All right, thank you, Professor Kopp. We'll move on to Professor QV.
All right, hello again, everybody. So the main things for me, other than Zotponics, which would be building the hydroponic systems, I also advise, I'm one of the volunteer advisors for the EV and Baja race car program on the MAE side. And I advise both the ECS students there as well as the MAE students, depending on what they're doing. And there's actually a whole team of there's 5 or 6 of us total advising everybody. So you can get official class credit for that. And outside of that, I do a lot of autonomous systems research. And that actually ties back into the future of the EV race car program, where undergrad students are actually building their own vehicles, and it has to actually drive by itself on a race course. They've already started it in Europe and in Australia, and they'll be bringing it to the US in the next few years. So we're trying to get a head start on it over on this side. And outside of that, there's EECS 199, where students basically discuss with me. You'd come to my office hours, send me an email, things like that. And we talk about more individualized projects. And I have a handful of those positions open each year. And this is more general information, but if you're trying to do research with a professor, just check out their website. Similar to the QR codes that are linked here, you can see what topics they're talking about, and then just email them and ask to come to their office hour and talk with them about their research. So it's not just us here in the panel. A number of us have spots open, but we don't advertise it because there's literally 1,000 of you and only about 100 of us. So you have to reach out to us a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Move on to the next panelist, which would be Professor Ardonia.
Yeah, so I guess just adding into what I said earlier, and maybe what would be helpful also is if I send a link or copy a link in the chat to my website. So for undergrads, the formal mechanism that I've interacted with the undergrads, or I've had undergrads in my lab, is through the 199. So because my home department is CBE, it's the CBE 199. And in my lab, it's been a bit tricky since I started because of the phased operations. So between the phase 2 and phase 3, we've been dealing with the maximum occupancy limits of the lab spaces that we are in. But I think that this opens up an interesting point, because moving forward, I think there are projects that could be done virtually as well. Some of those have been started during that time that we were dealing with the phase 2 and phase 3 operations. So in addition to participating in the research, which I mentioned mainly about engineering biomaterials and biointerfacing, my undergrads also participate in our group meetings and present in our journal club presentations. They lead a discussion, selecting 1 or 2 papers, and yeah, I think that's another activity that they do in the lab. And then my undergrads that have been able to come to the lab so far, they are also assigned with specific lab tasks. Like we have a person that takes care of our protocol, an undergrad that takes care of compiling the protocol and editing it, and also helping with the inventory, online inventory, some of the things that helps undergrads get a glimpse of some of the managing tasks that are done in the lab. So yeah, those are some activities that we have in the lab. And maybe also to mention, if any of you are interested in applying to grad school, I have also been part of this STEM mentoring network for Filipino students. So if you want to be involved, here's the website. I don't know if a couple of you will be going to grad school. If you will be a grad student in the upcoming academic year, then you can also apply as a mentor. So I guess these are some of the things that I've been involved with.
Yeah, thank you for that link to the grad school program. We appreciate that. And lastly, we'll go to Professor Gillespie.
Well, it was pretty good. Everybody's got some wonderful labs to go to. Unfortunately, I don't have a lab. I just lecture at the school, so mostly to work with me, attend my class or send me an email. I like to take on a mentorship role for any students interested. Most of my class, I talk about what the industry is doing and compare it to what I'm teaching in the class, tell you what's viable, things like that. But I love working with the students. We used to sponsor capstone projects in the informatics and mechanical engineering departments at UCI. Unfortunately, our company stopped doing that. I'm trying to persuade our new management to renew that because it was a very wonderful relationship that we had with UCI. So hopefully I'll get to mentor some more of those capstone projects and lead those. Those were wonderful. But if anybody ever has any questions or wants help with such projects, I'd love to help any students with anything that they need. So that's about all I have.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thanks again to all the answers from the panelists. We'll move on into the second question that I have for you guys, which is that, as you know, many of freshmen and new transfer students really haven't gotten to experience what it's like to be on campus and physically going to class and stuff like that due to COVID. So I guess, in your opinion, as a professor, what are the biggest challenges or benefits of moving to a virtual platform? And what do you think are in your opinion, what are the biggest differences between the two? And we'll start with the same order. So we'll start with Professor Kopp again.
Oh, great. You should switch it up. That way I have the challenge of following up other people.
All right.
So let's see. The biggest challenge, I would say, like I said, I was here for just a few months before we had to go remote. But I would say the biggest challenge is creating the community. So when I got here, it really felt like UCI was this wonderful community. I mean, there literally are thousands of you. But within the engineering quad and within your classes, you sort of build these connections, and that was really hard to duplicate, right, when we went remote. So I would say plugging into things as much as you can, things like Fusion, interacting with people, getting sort of face-to-face interactions is going to be really helpful as you move forward. So that's been a challenge. I think one of the biggest opportunities is the flexibility, right? So now we can all be anywhere in the world and talking to each other. And that really has some advantages, right? Because a lot of our students, have other things going on. They're working, maybe they're parents, maybe they're taking care of someone else. There's just a lot of things that it's more convenient that if you want to talk to a professor in office hours, you can just log in online as opposed to having to, physically find their office and, carve out time in your day. So there are some advantages, and I hope that we can take advantage of those moving forward. But again, I'm really looking forward to the community of being back together. And so if you came here to UCI for the community, you'll get it. So stick with it.
Thank you. So we'll move on to Professor Cutie, then I'll switch it up next time.
Yes. So the biggest challenge we're seeing both on the faculty and on the student side is simply getting motivation to show up and look at your screen for hours on end, right? One of the things I found that helped, maybe Colin can stop sharing the screen for a little bit. And I don't think we need that slide anymore. If everybody goes to gallery view, and if you don't already have your video on, if you're comfortable, turn on your video. This has helped me the most, as well as our students, just so we can see each other. It's so much different in person, right? But there are advantages. Some of the advantages, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this with our industry panel, more of whom were able to show up because they didn't have to fly into town and get parking and all of this stuff. One of your advantages here is all of this other time that you would have spent driving to school, looking for parking, walking between classes. You can now utilize that time to do something else. But the difficult part here is you now have to want to do that, right? And a lot of us are kind of reaching that point where we're like, oh my God, I need this to end. I need to go back in person and just see people, right? I'm feeling the same way, but we can actually take advantage of this. So you actually have hours now that are free. It's up to you on how you want to use it. Right? And the best thing you can do is just pick something, do anything, drop by Professor Kopp's office hours and talk with him about the different projects he's advising, right? Because now you can just show up. One other thing I found that helped a lot of students, we did this for a couple presentations. Initially, when this was happening, everybody was just like, oh, cool, I can be in my pajamas now. I can just roll out of bed. I can show up. We found that that actually doesn't help in the long run. So even today, I got dressed up for this presentation. I'm wearing real pants. It helps. It puts you in this mentality, right? Some of us have actually left our house, walked around the neighborhood, and then walked back into our house like, okay, I'm in work mode now. I've told some of our students that they should find a routine, do that, get used to it, and then take advantage of your platform. Just something to think about. But yeah, I think it's good and bad. I think we should keep some elements of it. Having certain things virtual is really nice, but I'm really looking forward to just going back in person.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I guess I'm kind of guilty of going to class in bed or undressed and stuff like that. So I guess I'm not really one to talk, but we'll move on to Professor Ardonia.
Yeah, so the very sad thing for me about that question is I never experienced the UCI community in person yet since I joined. But of course, I can comment on the pros and cons of being virtual. So I think really the community is it's the very big disadvantage that it's hard to establish real human interactions, during lectures. And when I taught both undergrad and grad classes, for me as a professor, it's just really hard to assess without all of the videos turned on, to see the faces of the students, whether you understand the concepts that I'm discussing, because in person, just a simple nod, or you can see the facial expression. And I know a lot of you might not be comfortable turning on your cameras. So I respect that. And I know a lot of us professors understand that maybe you're not in a position that you're really comfortable to turn on your cameras, and that's fine. But I think that's a huge element that we're missing in the classroom. Just those subtle cues, just to understand whether you understand the discussion or whether you're engaged. It's something that I found difficult when I was teaching online. But I guess one of the specific benefits that I heard from the students is that now for our teaching materials and all of the lectures, they have to be recorded. And I heard a couple of comments from the students saying that it is actually helpful for them because they can always go back to the materials, and also the flexibility, which has been mentioned before. You can go back to those materials anytime, or the recorded sessions, if you won't be able to attend the classes. So yeah, I guess that's all that I can say for now.
Yeah, thank you. And then we'll move on to our last panelist, which is Professor Duospie.
So this was my first time teaching, and much like Professor Ardonia, I only taught in the virtual setting, but I also did my master's in math education with a virtual school. I have brought a lot of experience to it. And what I found was that I ended up with a really high live class attendance because I tried to involve the students through the chat. I would pause the lecture, we would do lots of polls and lots of videos, and we'd have discussions about stuff. And we really tried to engage the students. We made lots of jokes about not wearing pants. We have a poll on, are you wearing pants today? That kind of stuff. So we really tried to make it as fun as possible, and try, like Professor Kopp said, just try and get the community. It was really hard to feel the community of UCI through the online. And but recording the lectures really helped the students. But then you'd find the procrastination really kick in with the students. They would wait until the last minute and then try and watch the lectures and do all sorts of stuff and just to try to get their material in and get the assignments done. And you could really tell who did it and who showed up and participated. But moving on from that, I'm really looking forward to this fall. We're hopefully moving from a virtual platform back into live lectures. I can't wait to do that because I've actually never taught a live lecture class. So that's going to be very exciting. But I think what I'm still going to do is I'm still going to record my live lectures so people can go back and visit the material. And a lot of second language, English for second language students have a really big benefit from being able to rewind and listen to it again, especially for some professors like myself who seem to talk really fast through some of the material. And then they get the translation, the talk to text. What's that called when it's, I can't think of it, but basically it's the words. They have it written there so they can read what you're saying as well. So yeah, so it's going to be a great summer quarter and great fall quarter getting back in. I think classes start live in the fall, so that's going to be wonderful, and I look forward to seeing everybody.
Right, thank you for that. I've been considering putting up that poll you were talking about, but I've decided against it, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks again to all the panelists. Those are all the questions that I have for you. So we will now move into the open Q&A. So anyone in the audience, if you have any questions for each of these professors, feel free to write it in the chat and I will ask that question to the panel. Or if you want to ask the question yourself, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can ask the question yourself. So I guess to start, we have Richard, who has raised his hand. So go ahead.
Hello, my name is Richard. I'm a fourth year computer engineering student, and I just had a question. This is for all the panelists. So a number of first years or second years, I know all of you have said previously you work with like a lot of students. What are some things that help students stand out? And I guess let me rephrase this. What are some things students aren't doing that you wish more of them were doing? And particularly for first and second years, if you can. All right.
So we'll change it up. So we'll start with Professor Cutie this time.
All right, cool. If you remember, the picture on my intro slide was actually a group of students. They were mostly upperclassmen by this point, but the biggest thing that can help you stand out is run an outreach. That outreach was actually student-driven. And the students there are both engineering students who are basically graduating, their upper division, but we have some freshmen and sophomore who participated as well. And it was a different set of students who actually came up with the whole outreach program and ideas from a few years before, and they trained these students. And the rest of the students in this picture are high school students from one of the local high schools. This one happens to be my alma mater, because I wanted to give back to the school that I came from, which I knew had 0 engineering programs. The most sophisticated engineering program we had when I was a student there was they showed us how to use Microsoft Word and Excel. Okay, so the population here didn't know much about engineering, much less the difference between chemical versus mechanical versus computer. So we ran a program free of charge. DCI actually sponsored a big part of it, and we were able to run a 6-month program. The entire curriculum, the outreach, the organizing with the students, all done by our UCI students. That's the biggest thing you can do. Do something outside of the curriculum. And for the freshmen and sophomore who think you don't know that much to teach somebody, you always know more than you think you do. And even if you just learn how to turn a blinking light on an Arduino, that's more than some other people would know. And you can actually teach that to somebody. The coolest thing was to see these students who weren't even considering going to college build a freaking autonomous RC car that can follow a line using their own sensors by the end of this program, right? That was huge for them. I know one of them is pursuing computer science and engineering now. The other students, I'm not 100% sure because they haven't kept in touch with us, but they were all very excited while they were in the program. Okay, so my main thing is do something, do anything. And outreaches are probably one of the best things you can do. And it actually motivates you to continue doing it because now you have to teach somebody how to do something.
All right, thank you, Professor Cutie. Fusion did something similar to that a year ago, actually, with our autonomous RC car project. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that. So now we'll go on to Professor Adonia.
I actually have very limited experience with interacting with first years and second years here because I noticed that a lot of the people that reached out to me so far for the 199s or for research experience are already in their junior and senior years. So I guess with that limited experience, what I would say is that it would be really helpful if you know that you want to pursue advanced degrees, for example. I think it would be very helpful to reach out to research labs and get hands-on experience as early as freshman or your sophomore year. Yeah, so.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to Professor Duospie.
Yeah, so, trying to stand out is extremely hard in your first and second year. All of us who have been students at one time or another have gone through it. It's not easy. It always goes back to the age-old experience or question of how do I get experience when I don't have experience? And so the way you do it is you just got to jump in and get your feet wet. You got to find something, meet people, talk to your professors. That's one of my things I wish more students would do is speak up about anything. I mean, you have a question in class, ask your question. So many people just keep their hands down, learn the material. Raise your hand, talk to the professor, go to office hours. And one of the other things that I really like to see, especially in any student, is the ability to argue a point. If your point is right or wrong, just having the bravery to bring it forth and to argue it and to either accept that you are wrong and move on, or to be able to prove that you're right in one way or another. Just having the arguments is wonderful. It's one of the things I love about teaching is students that try to argue their grades. Lots of teachers don't like that. I really do. I love it when a student tries to, get a few more points and say, well, if you look at it from this perspective, and software especially is so open-minded, you can come at it from different angles and different ways. And so, by that standard, just my point is just speak up and, don't worry about looking dumb, or don't worry about offending someone, or don't worry about being wrong. Just do it, get your feet wet, and speak up and take constructive criticism when it comes, and and, you know, make the most of what you can do. You know, don't sit idle. That's one way to not stand out. Just sit there and do nothing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Professor Gillespie. And we'll move on to the last panelist, Professor Kopp.
Yeah, I would just echo what was just said, actually. I mean, just speak out. The biggest thing for me would probably be come to office hours. So as a student, I did my bachelor's degree at University of Arizona, and I never went to office hours. I was way too intimidated, and I could have learned so much more. Now I wish I could go back and, you know, ask all these questions, and I feel like I would have learned so much more as an undergraduate if I had just been, you know, had the courage to go to office hours. So I think part of that is finding a faculty member who maybe is less intimidating. You know, try it out with somebody who you're more comfortable talking to. And I think it just gets easier and easier. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. So yeah, ask questions in class, but also come to office hours. And especially for students like freshmen, or maybe you just transferred here, I would say you don't need to spend any time, you know, getting used to things. I would say jump in right away. And often, you know, I found some of the transfer students are some of the most motivated students, and they do some of the best work, you know, right after joining UCI. So I would say if you show enthusiasm, you show motivation, willingness to learn, the faculty really appreciate that, and you're gonna stand out. So don't hold back. Just reach out to us. It's scary to say that because, again, there are thousands of you. So if you all came to office hours, we'd have to have, you know, more lecture halls. But that said, it shouldn't be a limited resource. So you should all take advantage of it. That's why you're here.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kopp. As a transfer student, I'm glad you talked about transfer students like that. So thank you. We have another question from Nick, if you want to ask it.
Hi, everybody. I am a third-year Mechie. I'm specializing in aerospace as well. But my question is actually about like choosing between a master's and a PhD program. So my question for you guys is, how did you guys make the choice between pursuing master's versus PhD programs? And for the case if you did both, what was the reason for PhD after master's?
The question is in the chat if you need it also. We'll start with Professor Ardonia this time.
For me, after bachelor's or right around my senior year, the question for me is actually whether I want to pursue med school or PhD. And the reason for that is because I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry, and I think the job prospects of master's degree or of having a master's degree in chemistry versus PhD are very different. And I think if you want to obtain a master's degree in chemistry, at least back in the Philippines, you're more geared towards industrial positions. Whereas I knew that I either want to be a professor or want to pursue an MD. At the end of the day, I decided that I am more interested in research. And so I followed the path that is appropriate for going to academia and becoming a professor, which is why I went towards a straight PhD program. Maybe my colleagues here would be able to share their experience more about the differences between a master's and PhD in engineering.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Adonia. We'll move on to Professor Gillespie.
Yeah, so for me, the choice was really about when I was going to school when I went into grad school, I wanted to get my master's in education because I knew I wanted to teach, but I didn't know if I wanted to do research or not. So my bachelor's was in computer engineering, and I didn't want to get specialized. I wanted to stay broad with my options as I grew older. And so I know that when you get your PhD, a lot of times that kind of focuses what your research is going to be on. It kind of focuses where you're going to be. In fact, currently, I'm considering getting my PhD in artificial intelligence because I've really found the passion for that, as I've done many types of programming in my life. So now at the age of 37, I'm finally considering getting my PhD. But for the last 16 years, I've been learning and studying, just kind of broadening my horizons. There's no reason that you have to go get a PhD or a master's. It kind of depends on what you want to do and when you want to do it. My wife, she knew she wanted to be a researcher. She got her PhD in clinical psychology, and now she's working for Dr. Beth Kaufman, one of the greatest psychologists in there, and she teaches at UCI, and she's amazing. But she knew exactly what she wanted to do and went for it. I did not. So I guess that kind of answers your question, hopefully, a little bit. PhD is a little bit more specialized. If you know where you want to go for it. Get the PhD in that area. The master's is just something you get on your way to a PhD, or you can just get a master's, which kind of opens up your opportunities. Like in my experience, like I got to teach at UCI because I had a master's in education. So now I get this experience and opportunity. When I get my PhD, maybe then I become a tenure track professor and open a research lab or do something like that. But hey, I don't know. To each their own, you know. So I guess that's all.
All right, thank you. Move on to Professor Kopp.
Yeah, so my plan was never to get a PhD. I was, again, at the University of Arizona, I was thinking maybe I would get a master's degree and go work in industry. You know, I thought with a master's, skill, I would learn a few more things and I'd be more marketable. And so that's what I was thinking, but I was fortunate enough to start doing undergraduate research with a professor in my senior year. And it was him who encouraged me to apply to graduate school. And so that's really why I'm where I am today. It's because he gave me the opportunity to do undergraduate research. And I would say choosing between master's and PhD, in engineering, a lot of times you will just pick up the master's along the way. And it is a way out. If you really don't want to do the PhD, you could leave with a master's. But another thing to think about is the financial aspect. So honestly, a lot of engineering students pay for their own master's degrees. It's not funded by being a teaching assistant or a research assistant. So if you apply for a PhD program and you're competitive and you get selected, you're more likely to get financial support as a teaching assistant or research assistant. And so that's the advice that my undergraduate research advisor gave me was, if you're at all interested, apply for the PhD, and hopefully you can get some financial support as well. Yeah, so that's my tip.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to last panel, which is Professor Cutie.
Yeah, so to elaborate on what Professor Kopp said, all of the UCs are giving full ride scholarships for PhD students, or at least they're in the process of doing that for all the engineering programs. UCI just started adopting that officially for our department this year, but in practice, they've supported all of the PhD students in previous years as well. And even some master's students get TA-ships, things like that. It was stuff I didn't know going into grad school. I was never planning on going into grad school for any reason, because I actually got a job offer before I even graduated, and I just worked for a few years. And I was like, I'm making money, I'm doing fine. For me, in my particular situation, it was actually because of the economy. So there was a recession a little over 10 years ago, and everybody was getting pay cuts, getting fired, things like that. So I made a deal with my work that I'd go back to school and then just work part-time and nobody would cut my pay. So that was pretty cool. And then while I was in the master's program, that was just me buying time so that at the end of 2 years, I would have more job opportunities, things like that. And the economy hopefully would start recovering by then, which it was. And during that time, I took advantage of undergraduate programs. I joined exchange programs with undergraduates, stuff like that. And we got to visit Silicon Valley, look at all the different positions that were available, tour these big companies. And my favorite company was IBM at that time. And we were discussing and looking at their research lab. I was like, wow, there's literally thousands of PhDs here and 3 master's people. That's what they told me. And everybody gets to do whatever they want. And I was like, that's really cool. So how can I work here? They're like, get your PhD and then come talk with us. So I was like, okay, cool. And then at that time, my boss told me, he's like, why don't you get your PhD? And I was like, I don't know how it works, and I don't know how I can afford it. And this is when he told me it doesn't cost anything. And I was like, what? And in fact, they pay you. And I was like, what? I was like, why did you tell me this 2 years ago? I would have just done it this way. I didn't know anything about this. So then I just decided to do it. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. All I knew was one opportunity was to go work at IBM. I was like, cool, that will give me that opportunity. And the other thing is I know this professor, every single person he's graduated has gone on to do good things. I don't think I can go wrong doing this by talking to my advisor. And to follow up on this, because Samantha asked a follow-up question, how did I choose between research and teaching? Initially, my program was actually purely research focused. We were working on this program that I worked on as a staff member there and just extending it. It was really cool stuff. It had to do with like optimizing circuit design and doing these fancy things that save companies millions of dollars. I was not interested in it whatsoever. What I was interested in was when I started TAing, I was like, oh, this is cool. Students are like the biggest black box of engineering, and getting the output you want with these different inputs. I found that really interesting. And I discussed that with my advisor. So then after like 2 or 3 years into this, we completely changed my whole dissertation to something that would suit me for a teaching position. And I only found all of this out simply because I kept taking opportunities that I was like, this seems like possibly a good idea. And what was going to be the worst case scenario? I drop out of a PhD. I still had my master's. I was still fine. Economy was recovered by then. So I had really little to lose. I was in a good situation versus some other students who had to do certain things or they get kicked out of the country, right? So yeah, if you have an opportunity, take it. And if you are considering grad school at all, please, number one, talk to your professors. And number two, something our domestic students are not doing that I've noticed a lot of our international students do, which is reach out to the schools you're interested in. Talk both with the admissions office as well as the professors there who you're interested in working with. That's a big difference between our international versus domestic students. Your resume, your CV, your personal statement should not be your only interaction with the school. It's the same thing with applying for jobs as well. Just because you submitted your resume doesn't mean you shouldn't follow up. And after you get the interview doesn't mean you just wait. You should follow up, say thank you, all of that stuff, just so that they keep you in their mind. Okay. Yeah. And then I started teaching.
Yeah, thank you. I guess going off of that, I'd never realized how much PhD students actually made until I looked it up. So yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you all. We have a question in the chat from JD Lamonti, that's his name. As a freshman, you are still sort of establishing academic knowledge. So how much knowledge do you panelists consider as preliminary for a research position, if at all? And we'll start with Professor Gillespie.
I honestly don't know how much knowledge is preliminary for a PhD. I've never gone for one. I'll not even take up time. I'll let everyone else answer.
All right, for sure. We'll move on to Professor Kopp then.
Yeah, for me, I think it's more about motivation than knowledge or skills. So you can always be trained in certain things. Like I think Professor Ardonia was talking about, we have people who do physical things in the lab. We can train you to do things. You can be useful. So reach out. There are opportunities for you. You can be guided by other undergraduate students. You can be guided by graduate students. You can be guided by the faculty. So I think if you're motivated, there is a place for you. And you'll learn the skills that you need. And you also learn whether you like working in that lab or not. And maybe you want to try something else. So again, start as early as you can and explore those opportunities.
Yeah, okay, we'll move on to Professor Cutie. Thank you, Professor Kopp.
Yeah, the best time to start talking about research positions is when you're a freshman. Why? Because even if you possess 0 skills, you can find out what skills you need. And then you can spend that next year getting those skills. That's actually what I did as a freshman and sophomore. I went to career fairs. I went to the ones aimed at juniors and seniors, not because I could get those jobs at that point, but now I know what the companies are looking for. And then by the next year, when I came back, I'd have all or at least some of those skills. Okay, so generally speaking, the best thing to do is just reach out to the professor or the research lab you want to work with, whether that's for undergrad research or for grad school. And then in particular for me, I'm relatively open, but there's minimum requirements to do certain projects with me. Anything autonomous, I actually put on my website that I expect you to go through certain tutorials and that you successfully completed it. just so that we could save a few months out of everybody's time before you jump into it. And number two, to make sure that you're actually interested in doing that. Because although some things sound fun, because you're like, oh, this is the hot topic, it boils down to a lot of math. And some people do not like math. And then you have to realize that you're going to commit 3 to 6 months into doing this math. So yeah, the big thing is just talk with your professor. And one of the students messaged me saying that I didn't really answer all of Samantha's question. So I want to wrap back around to that as well. In terms of going into either branch, research or teaching, try both. Because what you'll find out is not necessarily what you like, but what you don't like. Maybe you really don't like a specific thing. Maybe after TAing, you find out you don't want to do that. Or maybe after doing a few quarters of research on a particular topic, you realize you don't want to do that. And that's totally fine. The biggest thing is just stay in communication with your advisor. That's what your advisor is for. Grad school is dramatically different than undergrad because you're working with one person or a handful of people, and it's just like a team. And they all want to see you succeed, but they're not mind readers, so you got to talk with them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Cutie. We'll move on to Professor Ardonia.
I agree with everything that has been said so far, and particularly emphasize on reaching out, because you'll never know what the professors are looking for a specific position. Maybe there's a specific project that are actually good for freshmen. And if you will stay in that lab until your 4th year, it's also great because then you have higher opportunities of being part of specific papers and maybe establishing your own project in that lab, which later on, when you apply for PhD programs, if that's something that is of interest to you, that's going to be helpful, so showing that you have some publication. So yeah, and I also want to circle back on what Professor Kopp said about the motivation. So when I talk to students who email me and say, I am interested in your lab, first of all, I look at the email. Did they actually read what my research is all about? I've had someone reach out to me doing inorganic chemistry, and clearly I'm an organic chemist and I deal with biomacromolecules. So putting in some thought into those emails that you send to the professor, it's not just about reaching out, but being but putting in more thought. And it's not about doing a high throughput screening wherein you email all of the professors and see which ones will reply, because like what Professor Cutie said, it's not just about what research positions are available for you, but what research positions would interest you. So do that homework of understanding what type of activities am I motivated to do, what sounds cool to me. Do the homework of reading a couple of papers about that lab, because the papers are there. There's no such thing as a barrier for you to read those papers and see if that sounds interesting to you. And then, yeah, I look at the email and look at whether the student is sincerely curious, at least just curious with my research group. And then I set up a Zoom meeting with them. Well, for now, Zoom meeting. Hopefully in the future, I'll be able to have in-person meetings with the students. And then so far with these in-person Zoom meetings, I get the chance to know the student more and see whether they are trainable. And sometimes within a couple of minutes of conversation, you can see whether they have the I guess the background training, or yeah, it's hard to describe, but just being able to be, or that quality of being trainable. So all of those things, it just all goes back to reaching out and sending a thoughtful email to the professors. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. And thank you to the other panelists as well. I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to make sure I don't skip any questions. So we'll go back to Samantha Sanchez's question, which is, and this will also be the final question, by the way. How did you choose between a focus in teaching versus a focus in research? That is teaching professorships versus research professorships. And do you have advice for going into either branch? And we'll start with Professor Kopp to end it off.
Sure. So I would say if you're getting a PhD, you're going to have to focus on research. I mean, that's the goal. That's your output. So it's a great time to find out if you like it or not. You also might get to be a teaching assistant, for instance, and learn if you like teaching or not. So the reason why you do a PhD is because you want to do research, I think. Let's see. So I really fell in love with research, and I was doing research even after graduating with my PhD. And then it was while I was at San Diego National Labs, I was also an adjunct faculty at the University of New Mexico. And I really just, I had both perspectives. I was fortunate enough to be both doing research in a career position and also teaching at a university. And it was much more exciting to me to go teach at the university than it was to go to my day job at the labs. So I made the switch. But try out research as an undergraduate. And if you like research, then go for the PhD.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Professor Kopp. Professor Cutie, I know you answered Samantha's question a little bit earlier, but do you have anything to add to what you said?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. Just everybody has to do research regardless. The biggest difference is afterward, what do you want to focus on? Would you rather focus more on teaching or would you rather focus more on research? And a lot of that really has to do with a bunch of outside factors. Where do you want to work? What do you want to do with your day? Who do you want to work with? Things like that. So it's not just about the research or the teaching, because you actually can do both. And a number of us do both. Everybody has to do everything, just how much time you want to spend on it. And I guess the closing thought of all of this is do whatever the hell you want. And it's okay to change your mind. I have colleagues who graduated the same time I did with a degree in CS or a degree in chemical engineering. They completely changed their jobs after 10 years. And that's okay. It's just, you find out that you don't want to do that anymore. And nobody's going to stop you. You can go back to school whenever you wanted. I started school again way late.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Professor Cutie. And we'll move on to Professor Ardonia.
Totally agree with that. Finding out what you're passionate about along the way. And as what has been said, when you go to grad school, you have to do research anyway. But if along the way, you already know that you want to have a teaching focused future, then it's a great opportunity also to be more proactive about teaching fellowships or even just TA positions. And I think also if you're unsure, or if while doing grad school, if you like both opportunities, I think trying out and exploring opportunities for teaching as well and experiencing that is important, because you'll never get to know whether you like something or not if you don't get the firsthand experience in doing so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Ardonia. And we have our last answer of the day with Professor Gillespie.
Yeah, so choosing between research and teaching is, from all the ones I know, most of the professors that do research also have to do some teaching. I was never a big fan of research. I did it as a means to an end to learn something. I was never a very strong reader in school, but I love teaching. Teaching has always been a passion for me as far as interacting with students, peers. I like teaching my manager stuff. I like teaching other students stuff. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but when I was going through school and I was looking at the salaries that teachers make as just strictly a teacher, it was not worthwhile if you want to have a family and things like that. So I followed what I was good at, and that was engineering. And engineering has a bit of research, but it's not like what PhDs do as research. It's not peer reviewed. It's not, as engineers, we solve problems, to real world problems, find solutions to real world problems. And, and they get paid a lot, but at the end of the day, I wanted to be a teacher. And so I got my master's in education when I was 26, knowing that eventually I would come around back to it, and now I finally am. And now that I've been in the industry for 17 years now, I'm finally looking into maybe getting a PhD and doing some research and applying all this knowledge and experience that I've accumulated into something that I'm finally passionate about and that I feel like I can contribute to. That being, and it's specific for me, it's combining the artificial intelligence of software with some of the new medical technologies that are coming out. But to do that, I'm going to have to do some research, and some of the advice the other panelists have given has been pretty enlightening to me. And I'll focus on what I want to do and go and research what schools and what professors actually are doing it now, and try and learn from them and what they do. And so to do that, I'm going to have to read their papers, and have to read their research and come up with some of my own and find a way to impress them if I want to go into their PhD programs. So it's interesting to find myself in the situation that I'm in now, 17 years after I graduated. You know, it's quite and again, I want to thank the panelists. You guys have been great. The students, you guys have been great. The Fusion group. Thank you again. I'm very fortunate to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And let me share my screen again. Thank you to all of the panelists, and thanks for everyone for coming today. I hope you guys learned a little bit more about the resources and opportunities available to you as undergraduate students. And I hope you guys all learned a little bit about research and opportunities. And yeah, thank you to Professor Cutie, Professor Kopp, Professor Ardonia, and Professor Gillespie for coming. And thanks to everyone else for coming. And yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And I just want to also mention, since Professor QV put a comment about reaching out to him, I'm happy to do the same. And again, it's all about reaching out. So I can put my email in the chat as well. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, and with that, I think I will pass it on to our president, Richard, to close out FUSIONCon. Panelists, you're welcome to stay for that if you'd like, but yeah.
All right, hello everybody. Once again, my name is Richard, and I do just want to say a few words to everyone who is present. Could you admit the waiting room is calling, by the way? Could you manage that? Thank you. But yeah, hopefully the past 2 days, whatever events you've attended, have been a great opportunity for you to network with your peers, faculty, and other professionals, and take the time to really reflect on the fact that it's been a weird, unusual year, and it is now May 2021. It's been over a year since online learning started. However, there has been a lot of opportunities for growth even then, as you have seen, and as hopefully you've heard specifically from this panel as well, that there are advantages to this that we can take away. And hopefully you can take that learning moving forward to drive your academic and professional careers. I do want to recognize our board members who helped organize this conference, as well as all the other events that we've had throughout the year. We've spent a long time really like translating all of our events virtually. And I just want to say their names really quickly. So we have Mando as our internal vice president. They're not here, they're unable to join us today, but I want to recognize their name. RJ, our external vice president, who also organized our panel yesterday for Alianza. Francis, who is our treasurer, and Kevin, who is our secretary. Lord Jean, our engineering director, who organized the project, the year-long project that you might have seen earlier, as well as the showcase that just happened earlier. Colin, our academics director, who organized this panel, the faculty panel. Ian, our social director, who organized Fusion Talks, a little bit of a TED Talks inspired event from yesterday. Kelby, Gabe, and Alfredo, our publicity directors, for working really hard and making sure that the UCI community knows about this event. And of course, our interns, I also want to recognize them. We have JD, Kai, Sam, Alexandra, Christian, Bobby, Sean, and John, as well as Noah. So please, rounds of applause for all these great students. They've been very instrumental in making sure that our events have run smoothly as possible this year, as well as FUSIONCon. And with that, I want to end FUSIONCon with the way we end all Fusion events. If you could turn on your camera and your mics, I will show you how we clap out. So what we do in Fusion, to end our events is we put our hands together, we start rubbing it and say, and we're done. Woo! So that was a practice one. Hopefully we can all do it together. I see people turning on their cameras. And whenever you're ready, I'm gonna start. So let's do this. Put your hands together, start rubbing. That's it for FUSIONCon. Woo!
Let's go.
We did it.
We did it. Last photo for today, if you're still here.
Yes, photo.
The camera's not working.
Let's turn on your cameras really quickly.
What's the item?
Colin, do you have an item in mind?
Oh, me?
Oh, I thought it was Colin.
The
It
item?
was gonna be.
Colin's the item.
Colin's
I don't know. Phones, drinks.
Phones.
Phones?
Have an item that you would like to represent yourself in this last photo. I'm grabbing a pen. Cover my face. Anyway, everyone ready? 3, 2, 1. Smile. I believe I took a couple. I will be sending that to all of you, but once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Woo!
And thank you.
Thank
Thank you for coming.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, jeez.
Hey, we're done.
Done!
Dude, fucking finally.
All right, you wanna stop recording so we could
No, keep this in.
Congrats, everybody.